If your behavior plan only focuses on stopping a behavior, I mean, you are clinically failing your client.
Yeah, it really is that severe of a clinical error. Like if
Yeah.
you just put a lid on a boiling pot without venting the steam, the pressure doesn't magically disappear.
Yeah.
You are going to get burned, and far more importantly, your client is going to suffer.
Right. So, welcome. If you are listening to this, you are stepping into a deep dive on behavioral intelligence. Today's mission is, well, an elite breakdown of the BACB 6th edition task list, specifically item H.3.
I get point three.
Yeah, we are analyzing the requirement to select socially valid alternative behaviors to be established or, increased when a target behavior is to be decreased.
Exactly. And let's set the clinical mission right from the jump here.
Right.
We are not here to just memorize vocabulary words so you can, bubble in the right answer on a test.
Absolutely not.
Right. This is an elite educator space. We are here to master the clinical application. As an ethical behavior analyst, you need to understand that trying to eliminate a behavior without providing a functional replacement isn't just ineffective. I mean, it's a critical failure in programming.
It's a complete breakdown.
It is. Our goal today is to master how to actually select those socially valid alternatives so you can walk into a clinic, a school, or a living room and create programs that genuinely change human lives.
So to master the exam, and more importantly, to master the clinic floor, we really have to unpack the core mechanics here. When we use phrases like socially valid and functionally equivalent in everyday practice, what are we actually talking about?
What are those buzzwords?
Yeah, the buzzwords. I want to run an analogy by you because I think a lot of people conceptualize behavior reduction as just, well, taking something away. But targeting a behavior for reduction without a replacement is really like building a dam across a river without digging a spillway.
Oh, absolutely. The water, which represents the client's underlying need or motivation, doesn't just disappear because you built a wall.
Like if you take away a person's hammer, you have to hand them a screwdriver.
Right.
If you just take the hammer, they're going to start hitting the nail with their shoe. The function is driving the nail, the form just changes.
That is exactly how behavioral physics work. The pressure just builds and builds until it violently breaches the dam somewhere else. And when water breaches a dam unexpectedly, it causes massive destruction. In behavior analysis, that breach usually takes the form of a much more dangerous, severe behavior. Like you didn't eliminate the need, you just temporarily blocked their primary way of needing it.
Okay, so if the problem behavior gets the client attention, or say escape from a hard task, or access to an iPad, or even sensory stimulation, the replacement behavior has to get them that exact same outcome.
Yes, that is what functionally equivalent means. It has to yield the exact same reinforcer. But there is a second, equally critical component here.
Which is the socially valid part.
Exactly. The replacement behavior must also be socially valid, meaning it has to be acceptable, practical, and functional for that specific client in their actual natural environment.
Right.
Because if it isn't, the natural environment won't reward it, and the behavior plan will just collapse the second you walk out the door.
Okay, let's see what this looks like when we apply it to a real human being. Looking at the clinical files we have here from the sources, there's a fascinating scenario involving a third grader named Kate.
I love this example.
Yeah, so the notes indicate Kate has diagnoses of oppositional defiant disorder and bipolar disorder. Her target behavior, the one the school desperately wants to decrease, is that she cries and screams in a very high pitch whenever she is denied access to preferred activities.
Right.
But looking closely at the observation data, it notes that sometimes Kate's actually able to ask for these activities, but she does it in a, whiny or babyish voice.
This is a textbook applied scenario where clinicians often make a critical misstep.
How so?
Well, the knee-jerk reaction from a school administration is almost always just make the screaming stop. But applying our clinical criteria, we have to select the best socially valid replacement behavior. We look at what she is trying to get, access to preferred items, and what she already knows how to do. So the best initial replacement behavior here is teaching her to ask for the activities in an appropriate volume, even if she's using that whiny voice.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Isn't a whiny, babyish voice still highly socially stigmatizing? I mean, especially for a third grader in a general education classroom?
Boy, yes.
If she is whining to her peers or her teacher, they are going to avoid her or get frustrated. Aren't we just trading one problem for another?
So that's a highly perceptive pushback. It really gets to the heart of clinical reality. Because yes, a whiny voice is not the ultimate end goal for a third grader.
Right.
But here is the secret to elite clinical programming. We use gradual shaping. Right now, Kate's primary tool for accessing what she wants is high-pitched screaming.
Which is way worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That screaming is highly disruptive and heavily stigmatized. If we demand that she suddenly use perfectly modulated conversational language to get what she wants, we are setting the bar way too high.
Because the jump from screaming to perfect polite requests is just too wide of a gap.
Precisely. She will fail, and she will immediately revert to screaming. We have to shape the topography of a skill she already possesses.
Okay, that makes sense.
She already asks for things in a whiny voice occasionally. That behavior is already in her repertoire. We reinforce that first because it is functionally equivalent. It gets her the item, and it is a massive step up from screaming.
So you reinforce the imperfect attempt because it builds the bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once the screaming decreases and she is reliably using the vocal request, even if it's whiny, well, then we can begin shaping the tone and pitch to be more age-appropriate.
We aren't building a brand new communicative response from scratch. We are working with what she brings to the table. You're validating her need to communicate before you critique her delivery.
Yeah, and think about the psychological relief for the client. Imagine being trapped in an environment where your only reliable way to get your needs met is to escalate to a full meltdown.
Oh, wow, yeah. That sounds awful.
Right. Teaching a functional replacement, even an imperfect one to start, gives the client a voice. It reduces the immense frustration of not being understood.
Let's move to another file from the case notes. A student named Owen. Owen engages in high rates of swearing during independent study time.
Oh, swearing during independent work, classic.
Yeah. The functional analysis identified that the reinforcer here is attention. Specifically, he wants his teacher's attention. Every time he swears, his teacher walks over and says, "Owen, that is inappropriate language."
And of course, that reprimand is actually escalating Owen's swearing.
Right, because the teacher assumes a reprimand acts as a punisher.
But functionally, for Owen, it is positive reinforcement. Look at the density of reinforcement there. He gets eye contact, physical proximity, and direct verbal interaction.
He wanted attention, and he got it.
He got it. Even if the attention is negative in form, it is serving the function perfectly. So, to decrease the swearing, we must introduce an alternative behavior that hits that exact same function.
So we need him to get the teacher's attention without swearing.
Exactly. The replacement must be something like raising his hand and making an appropriate verbal request, or asking a question about the assignment. It directly accesses the identified reinforcer social attention from the teacher.
What I find interesting about this specific replacement is that it's physically incompatible with the problem behavior. I mean, you can't really be asking a genuine question about a math problem and hurling a swear word at the teacher at the exact same moment.
Yes, that is called a differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, or DRI. It's a highly effective strategy.
EDRI, right.
It's easy for Owen to achieve, it's highly functional in a classroom setting, and it completely shifts the classroom dynamic. Think about the stress on that teacher.
Oh, they're constantly putting out fires.
Constantly reprimanding. By teaching Owen how to appropriately ask for help, you aren't just changing Owen's behavior, you are repairing the relationship between the student and the teacher.
You change the entire ecosystem of that classroom, right? But, well, here's the thing. This logic, find the function, find an appropriate behavior that serves the same function, and reinforce it. It sounds so clean when we are discussing it like this.
On paper, yeah.
But when you look at actual behavior plans in the field, people mess this up all the time.
They absolutely do. And they usually fall into a few very predictable, very dangerous clinical traps.
Let's dig into those. So teaching an active behavior avoids what's known as the dead man's trap, right? I see plans all the time where the goals say things like, the client will stop whining when presented with a worksheet.
Or the client will sit quietly with safe hands and not throw objects for 10 minutes.
Exactly. To the untrained eye, those look like perfectly reasonable goals.
And to an elite clinician, those goals are massive red flags. They violate a foundational rule of behavior analysis.
Stopping is not a behavior.
It's not. The absence of an action is not an action. We use what is called the dead man's test. If a dead man can do it, it is not a behavior.
Yeah.
A dead man can stop whining. A dead man can sit perfectly still with safe hands and not throw objects.
Right. Going back to our river analogy, the dead man's goal is just the dam. It's just the wall.
Yes, you cannot build a clinical intervention around the absence of behavior. If you simply block the whining without teaching an active observable replacement, you create a behavioral vacuum.
And vacuums in behavior don't stay empty for long.
They suck in whatever behavior takes the least effort to get that reinforcer.
Which means if sitting quietly doesn't get them out of doing the math worksheet, they might escalate from whining to ripping up the paper.
Or flipping the desk,
Yeah.
exactly. But I've seen clinicians realize they need an active behavior, and they still completely fail because they offer the wrong reward.
What do you mean? Like ignoring the function?
Yes, ignoring the function. They will try to use a procedure like DRO differential reinforcement of other behavior. They will give a kid a sticker or token every 5 minutes that the kid is not whining.
So they're reinforcing an alternative state? Is that not enough?
No, because it represents a fundamental mismatch of function. Giving a kid a sticker for sitting quietly when what they actually wanted was a break from the math worksheet does absolutely nothing to teach a functionally equivalent replacement behavior.
Right. The kid doesn't care about the sticker. They want out of the math.
Precisely. If the consequence you provide, the sticker, doesn't match the original motivation, the escape, the client learns no new skills to navigate their environment. They still don't know how to appropriately ask for a break.
The reinforcer for the new behavior must match the exact motivation of the old behavior. That makes perfect sense. But let's say the clinician identifies the function correctly. They know the client wants a break, so they decide to teach a replacement behavior. I see a lot of people push for the most complex communication possible.
Oh, the high-effort replacements.
Yeah, they think, well, if we were teaching them to ask for a break, let's teach them to articulate a full, polite sentence. Let's aim for the stars and give them a highly detailed picture exchange board with 20 different icons to navigate.
And that is another major trap. When you do that, you are violating the behavioral law of least effort. Humans, and all organisms for that matter, naturally conserve energy. A replacement behavior should ideally require equal or less effort than the problem behavior.
Break that down for me. Why is effort such a deal breaker?
Think about it from the client's perspective. If I can get my needs met by dropping to the floor and screaming, which is fast, immediate, and requires almost zero cognitive load, why would I stand up, walk across the room, open a dense binder, visually scan 20 different picture icons, find the specific break icon, walk back to you, get your attention, and hand it to you?
I wouldn't. I would just drop to the floor and scream because it works faster.
Exactly. We see this with the matching law. Behavior goes where reinforcement flows, and it favors the easiest route. If the replacement behavior is physically or cognitively harder than the problem behavior, the client will inevitably default back to the problem behavior. The new behavior has to be the path of least resistance to the reinforcer.
So if they can currently get a break by sweeping materials off a desk, the replacement behavior might need to be as simple as tapping a single red card that sits right in front of them.
Just one tap, they get the break. It has to be easier than the destruction.
The path of least resistance. You have to make the appropriate behavior the cheapest, easiest currency they can spend to get what they want. Okay, let's shift gears slightly, because here's where it gets really interesting. Everything we are talking about, the law of least effort, the dead man's test, mismatched functions, these are the exact concepts that trip people up when they sit down for their board exams.
Oh, completely.
Looking at the mock exam data, the test writers weaponize these clinical blind spots perfectly.
They absolutely do. The Pearson VUE exam logic is designed to separate the elite clinicians from the rote memorizers. You have to look at a messy, real-world scenario and find the answer that guarantees the client still gets their needs met safely.
Are there rules to follow here?
There are a few hard rules you need to internalize if you want to navigate these questions successfully.
Let's hear them. Lay down the rules.
Rule number 1. If you are reading a scenario where a punishment procedure or an extinction procedure is being implemented, immediately scan the answers for a differential reinforcement procedure. Specifically, a DRA or a DRI that builds an alternative behavior.
Because the exam will give you highly distractible options that only focus on the reduction of the problem, right?
Exactly. Do not take the bait. You cannot select an answer that just decreases behavior without actively building a replacement.
Because the BCBA Ethics Code 2.14 and 2.15 outline expectations for minimizing risk and prioritizing positive reinforcement. We have to build skills, not just suppress them.
Correct. Now, rule number 2. If a question specifically asks you to identify the best functionally equivalent replacement behavior for a given scenario, use a very specific filtering strategy. Step 1, eliminate any answer that fails the dead man's test. Cross out anything that says stop crying or refrain from hitting.
And step 2.
Step 2, look at the remaining active behaviors and choose the one that utilizes a skill already in the client's repertoire. or that requires the absolute least amount of effort.
So if the client already points to things, and the options are pointing to a break card versus vocalizing a full sentence asking for a break, you choose the pointing.
Every single time.
Yeah.
It is lower effort, it's already in their skill set, and it serves the function immediately. That is the clinical filter you have to look through. The exam isn't testing if you know what DRA stands for. It's testing if you know how to keep a client safe while changing their behavior in a functional way.
That filter is really what separates someone who just passed a test from someone who actually drives clinical outcomes. Pulling back the lens on all of this, beyond the exam room, why is mastering this specific concept so critical to the longevity of a clinician's career?
Because it all comes down to the relevance of behavior rule and the concept of maintenance. A behavior change is entirely useless if it doesn't survive outside of your carefully controlled clinic.
Right, you can build the most beautiful, intricate token economy during your one-on-one session. But what happens when that client goes to the grocery store?
Or a mainstream classroom, or their grandparents' house.
Exactly. The real world does not care about your token economy. They aren't walking around with a clipboard and a sheet of stickers waiting to reward you.
Precisely. The natural environment is ruthless. If a replacement behavior isn't socially valid, the parents, the teachers, and the peers will not reinforce it once you leave.
Yeah.
And if the natural environment doesn't reinforce the new behavior, the target behavior will inevitably relapse. The relevance of behavior rule states that we should only target behaviors that are likely to produce reinforcement in the client's post-intervention environment.
So if you teach a behavior that the world ignores, you have clinically failed the client.
You have. And this brings us to the most powerful insight of all. Taking away a behavior without providing a functional, socially valid replacement isn't just clinically ineffective, it leaves the client incredibly vulnerable.
How so?
Well, they are stripped of their primary method of communicating their needs. What we are really trying to do is build what we call behavioral cusps.
What does that mean in practical terms? Like, how does a cusp differ from just another goal on a treatment plan?
A behavioral cusp is a skill that opens up entirely new worlds of reinforcement for the client. When you replace screaming with a socially valid request, you aren't just stopping a tantrum in a classroom. You're giving that client a skill they can use to interact with peers on the playground, to advocate for themselves in high school, to gain independence in the workplace.
You are quite literally unlocking doors for them that their previous behavior had slammed shut.
Exactly.
You aren't just taking away the destructive pressure of the river, you are carving out a channel that irrigates a whole new landscape for them. You're giving them a voice. So if this helped you, follow behavioral intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
And remember, at Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just test passers. Visit us at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
We talked a lot about attention and escape today, which are highly socially mediated functions. But think about this on your own. If a behavior is automatically reinforced, like scratching a severe itch or engaging in intense stereotypic nail biting, how do you design a functionally equivalent replacement when the environment isn't providing the reinforcer, but the client's own body is?
That is the ultimate puzzle.
Think about how you'd program for a private event. Keep analyzing, keep pushing, and we will see you next time.